Welcome to the Locum Strategist podcast. I am your host, Simon Parsons, and today I've got a very special guest with me today. He's a double board certified trauma surgeon, and what's cool is we've worked together for about 7 years now. I was looking it up, and we first started doing some locums work together, partnering on stuff back in 2015. I can't believe it's gone by that quickly, but I consider him to be a good friend, Dr. Omar El Sheikh. Thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Simon, for having me. Well, I'm doing great. I just came back from a locums assignment and can't be better, especially when I have that week off between.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you making time for this podcast. I had a few questions for you. I want to start out with this, and it's something I'm always curious about. I think about all the long hours that you put into your training, how arduous it can be to go through training to be a surgeon. What got you into doing this? Like, how did you end up deciding to be a surgeon, and what got you through some of those long nights when you were in residency, when you were working, 16 to 20 hours and hardly any sleep? But what was the underlying reason for why you got into medicine and specifically surgery or trauma surgery?
Both my parents were physicians, and I think like I just ended up going into medicine because I just loved it, and of course, when you see your parents and you see your dad, and as a role model, you just want to do the same stuff that he did. So I ended up going into medicine. Uh, my dad was ENT, my mom was dermatology. But anyway, the reason I went into surgery is, after I went into medical school and I noticed, started seeing like there were different rotations and everything. I felt like surgery is more about doing stuff, like more procedural. I noticed that even the surgical residents that we worked with, like, let's go do this, let's go do this chest tube, let's go do this dressing change, let's go do this, let's go do this case. Like it felt like it's more doing. When I went into internal medicine, I felt like they were always discussing the case, not to mention that the specialties, all specialties are good, but I felt I like the doing aspect of things, and that's what really got me into surgery. I did love the when I was doing my surgical residency. Initially, I was thinking of going into vascular surgery as a specialty, and I always had a special interest in that. But then, when I saw trauma, I saw that the trauma surgeons still do, and at least that's where I trained. The trauma surgeons still did vascular. They still did everything in the trauma setting. So I felt like, well, trauma is the best of both worlds. Like, you can still do the vascular stuff it depends on what the presentation of the patient is coming with. But I've noticed that trauma surgeons do vascular, they do thoracic, they do general surgery, they do everything else. And on top of that, also, they do critical care. So it also felt like you have the best of both worlds, because you're dealing with the medical aspect of dealing with the sickest of the sickest. When somebody's on a ventilator in the intensive care unit and you're the surgical critical care physician standing at the bedside, you're the guy who's treating that patient medically out of his, extreme sickness. And at the same time, you're a surgeon that does the surgery as well. So I felt like this is like the best specialty, and combines both, the best of medicine and the best of surgery in one. And if I had to do it all over again, I would still pick trauma surgery.
Oh, I love hearing that. And it's so funny to ask you this question because I remember asking you the same thing when we first started working together back in 2015. So that brings up some good memories. And back at that time, I believe you were working as a full-time trauma surgeon in a permanent position in Florida. What
Yes.
was it that made you reach out to me, or maybe I reached out to you, but what was it that got your wheels turning about doing locums? Because since then you've done some permanent work, but for the most part, you've been fairly doing a lot of locums. What was it that made you want to explore this, doing locums as your career?
Yeah, that's a good question, Simon. When I worked for 3 years as full time, and I was employed, I noticed that, first of all, like the schedule is, first of all, unforgiving, meaning, you're on call that day, you have to be that day, the amount of hours, the amount of work that you do is first of all becomes excessive. Number two, as a full-time guy, you're involved. You have to be involved in multiple hospital committees that you have to, you know, you have to be there for those committee meetings. They put you on a couple of committees. Plus, they have to tell you, like, you have to meet in the Department of Surgery meeting, and then the trauma performance improvement meeting. And then even if these meetings fall off on your days off, you're still expected to be there because you live in the same town. Like, so that's the thing about, not to mention, Simon, a whole bunch of stuff. Like, every surgery, sometimes your patient, you did a surgery on a patient, your patient comes back. You always get a call from your partner, like, hey, your patient is here. Do you want to come take care of it? Or like, and then you feel that, guilt feeling like, oh, maybe I should go because, that's my patient, or I did that surgery on that patient. So, hey, I'm only 30 minutes away. I'm just going to drive back to the hospital, even on your days off, even when you're off the clock, even if, I felt like it was a nonstop, and as we all know in medicine, when we don't work in a bank, or we don't work in a fast food chain, when the shifts supposedly should end at 7, it never ends at 7. What are you going to do with the patient that you just saw that needs to go to surgery, like you just saw like an hour ago, but then you're still waiting on the OR to get things ready? So you find yourself like always dragging, like your shift ends at 7 and you're never done until 9:30, 10 o'clock. By the time you go home, my wife and kids are asleep. Like, hey, your dinner's on the table, just eat and go to sleep, And so I found that I'm not even spending time with my family, not spending time with my kids. And despite the fact that I'm in the same town, so I felt like, so I wanted to give locums a try, and I did. And I could say, like, it's true that you go most of the time you're away from your family, away like physically in a different state, or but at the same time, when you're off, you're off. Meaning, when I'm off, I'm there to even go pick up my kids from school. I'm go there to help them with their homework. I remember even when we were scheduling this interview, I told her, like, we have to do it at a certain time because in the afternoon I have to work with my kids, especially when I'm doing my with my son, working with his algebra, like things like things like that could have never happened as a full-time. As a full-time guy, you're never there in the afternoon. You're never there to even go pick them up from school. You're never there to go and take them to basketball practice or soccer practice or something like that, attend the games. Of course, I was never there. Never there for birthdays. Never there for, even their friends' birthdays or stuff like that. So I felt like the locums afforded me an opportunity to be at least, let's say, if I'm even there for like maybe half of the month or 18 days a month, or even at least those 15 days that I'm off, I'm truly off, as opposed to when you're in full time, you're almost never off.
That is fascinating. You and I both value our time with our families, and I think that's so important. And one thing that I see often is people, they go through their whole career without doing something about it, without taking the action steps that you did to reclaim that time with family. So just to recap this, you're telling me that you actually get more family time because of locums, because I think that could be a block for a lot of people, is that if I'm doing locums and I'm away from my family. But in a nutshell, you're saying that you actually have more quality time with your family. When you're gone, you're working and you're focused on that. And when you're at home, you have more quality time with your family. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And it also works both ways as well. So when you're working, you're actually working because you're dedicated. So when I'm on a locums assignment, comes a case at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the evening, I would say, let's go and do it. The reason is, if I go back to the hotel, I'm just going back to the hotel. It's not like I'm going to miss dinner with the kids, or, I'm going to miss something, or I'm going to go back to my family, or I'm going to go do something. So you feel like, first of all, when you're working, you're actually more dedicated to your work. You're not trying to, hey, I'll just do this tomorrow, or you're trying to procrastinate or put things off. And at the same time, when you're off, you're completely off. Nobody bugs you about something. You might get like a courtesy text from one of your colleagues or the other locums guy, over there, and telling you, like, hey, your patient is doing well. Or if you're concerned about a particular patient, I can always text the guy over there and tell him, like, hey, can you give me an update on that patient or something? But for the most part, you're not kind of expected to go back and or go check on the patient or anything of that sort. So I feel like when you're there, when the time off, you're 100% there. And when you're at work, you're 100% devoted to work, or at least dedicated to work. And so you end up you're having the positives of both. And I do agree, like, and I would tell all the listeners and the viewers, I would tell them, like, yes, give the locums a try and you'll see the difference. Obviously doing locums, but then for that to happen, you have to do the drastic shift of going full-time locums. And a lot of people might say, oh, but full-time locums, I don't think I'll get enough work. That's a common misconception. If you get enough licenses and you're willing to travel and you're not willing to, a lot of people say, look, oh, well, I want to do locums, but I want to be driving distance. Well, that's kind of a little bit, you're going to have limited choices. If you go and do like 10 state licenses, and as you're going to have a lot of opportunities, and you're going to have a lot of, if you're willing to travel, go rural, go metropolitan, go here and there, you're going to find a lot of opportunities that you're going to be saying or refusing more locums assignments than actually saying yes. So there's enough work to go around in locums. The thing is, a lot of people just either don't give themselves, or they don't want to license in other states. And to be honest, we started when you and I started, Simon, back in 2015. It was back in the day when there was no IMLC. So that was back in the day when for every state license, you had to apply and go through the whole tedious process of applying for a full state license. And I think I did 8 licenses that way. And then comes along a miracle, which was long awaited and it was really needed, this IMLC thing. And now you can actually license in like 3 days in a different state. And boom, you have a license through the compact, which I'm sure anybody looking into locums will know about this IMLC compact. And I think it's the best thing that came to locums world since for a long time, and it has been long overdue.
I agree with that. Couple more questions on this, and then I wanted to shift into something you're passionate about, which is culture when it comes to locums. But 2 more questions when it comes to like achieving the life that you want to through locums. You've done something creative, or you and I have done a few creative things with you being able to work on the holidays while also bringing out your family. Can you tell me more about that and how that worked? What did we do with that?
Yes. So a lot of times, like, people say, like, well, I don't want to work Thanksgiving week, or I don't want to work like New Year's week, or Christmas week, because the kids are on spring break, or they're on break and I want to spend time with my family. Well, one of the things that we can do, and we have done it multiple times successfully, is, first of all, we've picked the right assignment. Obviously, if it's an assignment which is too busy or something like that, then I won't be there. But we've done it a few times where I either pick the night shift so that I'm available during the day to take my wife and kids, explore the city. And we've done that in multiple assignments in Florida, or, sometimes you might want to go like in wintertime, you want to go to this, like Arizona's, places like that, where it's actually nice to actually be there. And at the same time, as long as this assignment has been, it's known, and you've done it before, and if you do the night shift, you're going to have several hours, a few hours of like daytime that you can actually being the backup, but at the same time you're not expected to be working, and still you can take your family with you. And I think that is something that works really well. And you end up having not just it's not just you took your family somewhere and and you had a vacation, but I would say it's a working vacation. So you actually went on vacation and you earned some money. So which is the best of both worlds as well. Like and again, I think, for instance, my kids always wanted to go and see snow living in Florida. So we went to Wisconsin, and of course, like they built the snowman and everything else. And it was a really nice assignment. And I still like ended up still leaving for a few hours a day, going in and seeing patients. And sometimes I did get called in. Fine, I get called in, I go take care of something and then come back. But it was really nice for taking the family with you on locums assignments. And I think like that's something also to consider, knowing that this is kind of like high season for locums, like, especially the holidays and everything else. But there's also a possibility for those who want to have some time with their families. Well, obviously, if your kids are not in school and everybody else is on vacation, well, you can actually take them with you in locums and actually get, make it turn it into a working vacation. And it works very well, 9 times out of 10.
That is brilliant. I love that you shared that, because I would love for more people to think like that, think a little bit out of the box and get creative. So thanks so much for sharing that. One more question on this. You left a full-time position because it was impeding on your family life, and you found a way to use locums to have more quality time with your family. Is there much of a financial cost when it comes to doing something like that? Or have you found that you can be compensated well by doing locums and have quality time with your family?
That's a good question, Simon. I think if you work the same number of shifts that the full-time job is requiring of you, and you do your locums in a similarly busy place, and and obviously you're doing it like as a trauma surgeon, or you will actually make about the same, if not more. And that's my advice to locums, is that people or prospective locums people, I think like locums is the way to go, especially in certain specialties. I was even talking to a friend of mine, and he does pediatric oncology. So I was telling him like locums is the way to go, and he's telling me like, well, I wish I could do locums in my specialty, because as a pediatric oncologist, I can't. Like I have to make, he has to do a practice and stuff. But specialties like trauma, general surgery, acute care surgery, obviously not the general surgery where you do clinic and stuff, but the general surgery, acute care surgery, hospitalist, internal medicine hospitalist, all of these specialties, I think locums is the way to go. And rather than just be in one hospital where it's really hard to take vacations, it's really hard to schedule things the way you want. You remember last summer, Simon, not this past summer, the summer before. Well, I took a vacation for like a month, and I went abroad and came back and everything else. So how can you do that as a full time? Like, you can't, like, or the only way to do it, if you even take a 3-week vacation, is to take like a whole bunch of calls before and a whole bunch of calls after you come back. And it seems like a torture session before and after going on vacation. So you can always schedule that when you're in locums. Like, it's not like you are committed to anybody. Well, obviously, once you say like, I'm going to that place, and you give them your word, I think like it's of course these are the you have to follow first of all the ethical code of locums and NALTO guidelines, and you say yes. If you promise people your time, you got to give them that. But if you haven't promised that time and you said like, no, find someone else, well, you're not employed, you're not committed there. You can actually take your time off as needed. So I feel like to answer that question, I think if you do the same number, if you go shift to shift, or you put both shifts on the same scale, you'll find that as a locums, especially as a 1099, you'll find that you're keeping more. As a locums person. And if you even do it if you do the same number of shifts, you'll find you're getting like your same, and of course you have to work with, with the locums company and recruiters. And, how many times, Simon, we've said like, when we've spoken about assignments tonight, we've say like, this is not worth the time, or this is not worth the time away from the family. So obviously you have to work with your recruiter. You have to have your recruiter on your side, like, working with you here at Comp Health, Simon. We've done some assignments where we said like, we got to make it worth the time to be there or to take the time off. And 9 times out of 10, it does work, whether it's, through the, some strategic planning, I should say, you can get it to be worth your while.
Oh, I love that. And I just have to say, I salute you for being one of the people that takes control of that. Like, family time is so important. And sometimes I see people who are, where they wish they could have got that time back with their, I know that I'm never going to miss one of my kids' performances, and I'm going to be there for them. And I just salute you for being courageous and taking control of your skill set and being able to make the money that you want while also getting the time that you deserve with your family. Okay, here's a question that I know you're going to love diving into. I'm just going to tell you what we're going to talk about, but you've expressed to me several times that, and one of the reasons why you like locums is you like to keep your skill set diverse. And I know that there's different cultures between different hospitals, but locums has been a way for you to stay active. You've got a very, very diverse skill set. Tell me a little bit more about how locums plays into that as far as keeping things diverse and maybe the different cultures between hospitals. I want to hear you dive into this topic.
Yes. Oh, thanks, Simon, because that's the area that I really want to touch up on the most. When I trained as a trauma surgeon, I was passionate about what I was training under, and I trained in really good places, like and they trained us to do like a lot of. We developed a really diverse skill set that includes some thoracic, vascular, rib plating, all that kind of stuff. As a trauma surgeon, I was very well trained in those type of procedures. When I worked full time, you're you're confined to what that hospital culture is. So you go there in a place, and then all of a sudden they tell you like, no, you find that you might be stepping on other people's toes or other specialists' toes, or they tell you like, in this place, the guy who does vascular is the vascular surgeon. If you need an IVC filter, then you need to call us, or things like that. And you find yourself like, as a full-time guy, you say like, well, this can't work for me, and then it's always meetings and meetings with the other specialists, and we're trying to find a happy medium where like, okay, well, how about if I do this, and then things like that. What I realized when I did locums is that what happens in one hospital, the culture is very local to that specific place. So if somebody's interested in has a special area of interest, let's say a little bit of vascular trauma or vascular or thoracic trauma or something like that, you might go to a place where you want to do some rib plating cases, and then they will tell you like, no, you need to call thoracic surgery. And then you're going to find somebody who's jumping in your OR and saying like, no, you need to call me. I do this here. You find yourself going to another hospital and you don't get any kind of, you're actually, what you're doing is very welcome. In fact, you find that the thoracic surgeon is telling you like, thank you, because he's inundated. Maybe he has a whole bunch of procedures and he's very busy, to the point that he says, thank you for not calling me. I have been in places, Simon, where, you always knew that I had that interest in vascular since I was a resident, because that was part of my, I spent 6 months of my chief year in vascular surgery. So I went to a place where I did these vascular trauma procedures. And then one time, the vascular surgeon who was on call in that hospital, as you know, vascular surgeons, especially the full-time guys, they sometimes take call in in two hospitals at the same time. So he was dealing with an emergency at the other hospital. So then they called about a purely vascular case, like a cold foot. And they said like, hey, you need to come in and take care of this. And he says, I am dealing with an emergency at hospital B. And so he told the guys in hospital A, who's on for trauma? And then they told him like, well, it's Dr. El Sheikh. He says, well, run this case by him. He loves these type of cases, and I'll back him up when I'm done. And it went very well. Instead of transferring the patient and having him go miles and miles away, we ended up doing that. And I would say like, you'll find in places where in certain places, if you go rural, you'll find yourself like doing the endoscopies, all the endoscopies, colonoscopies, and endoscopy is actually required in a lot of these rural assignments, as you know, Simon. And you go to a metropolitan area and you're trying to do a colon cancer case, and you want to do your own endoscopy for the patient, and then they tell you like, no, GI and only gastroenterology does this. So again, it's more of like, when you're doing locums, you're going to be rotating between rural, medium-sized, large hospitals, smaller hospitals, critical access hospitals, and the experience in each one of those is very different. And you'll find that you're going to be, if you're one of those surgeons, and if any of the viewers are any one of those surgeons, you're having issues with a particular procedure, you want to do rib plating, and the thoracic guys won't let you. Well, try locums. Sometimes if you work in one hospital, it gets old after a while. You're going to find yourself, and if you don't do these procedures for a long time, you're going to either use it, you either have to do it or you lose that skill. So if you feel like you're not happy with that, then try going locums, because it's not the same everywhere. You will have that impression when you're doing full time that anywhere you go, you're going to have those issues. Not really. You're going to find in one place, you're never going to find one hospital that will let you do everything that you want, but you're going to go one hospital, you'll do all the vascular you want. In another hospital, you'll do all the thoracic you want. But then you're not, in hospital B, you're not going to be doing the vascular there because the vascular guys are very, I should say, like very, territorial, I should say. They're keeping their territory, which is fine. But then, as far as you are as a surgeon and your skill set, you're still getting that experience elsewhere. So it doesn't matter. I'm not going to do vascular surgery or doing vascular stuff in hospital A, but when I go to hospital B, I'll do all the vascular that I want. But at the same time, they won't let me do this here, but I do it at other places. And then you'll find yourself like, just follow the culture of the place that you are in, obviously. So I think the rule of thumb is when you're in Rome, do as Romans do. But the thing is, try other places and don't just stick with one place. And you're going to find yourself, as you keep going through this locum world, you're going to have a logbook that has all the cases and all the procedures that you're interested in, all the surgeries that you're passionate about. And at the same time, you've tried different places, met new people, tried different cultures, different hospitals, different settings. And they all come back as nice memories of that state or that part of the, of Midwest or something like that. And I should say, like, really, I had a pleasant experience doing locums, and I'm doing pretty much. I have not been, I have been doing locums since 2015, and I haven't been employed, I should say, under any employment contract since then. So I think locums is the way to go, and I wish more physicians do that because it does make sense. If you're in a specialty that just involves doing patients, just taking shifts, and your specialty is primarily shift based, why are you just limiting yourself to one place instead of doing it and in multiple places? And the license is now very easy. The IMLC just made licensure in a different state super easy to the point that it's almost like effortless at this point.
You've done such a great job with branding yourself, and I think I'm so glad you shared that point of just of being self-aware, right? If you don't want to go in and just go guns blazing and change everything, but like I think that's such a good point, is that you're receptive to the culture and adaptable to that. I think that is very important. One last thing I wanted to bring up to you, and I wanted you to share this story, because I think you're very good with creating boundaries in a very respectful way that is healthy to you and tips the scale in your favor. Now, I wanted to share an example that we had probably like several years ago. We sent you to a place in Arizona that wasn't a great fit, and you were able to just opt out of, you got to go try it out. It wasn't a good fit for you, but you have an abundance mindset and you found other ones that were, because not every place will necessarily be a perfect fit. There might be places where it's like there's some give and take. Maybe you're making some good income at a place because it's busy, but it's not your favorite place, and so you're willing to do that. But then there's some places that might be a deal breaker. Tell me, as my last question, tell me a little bit more about setting boundaries when it comes to going to a place and you're not okay with being treated the way that you deserve to be treated.
Absolutely, yeah, that's an important thing, Simon. So, and that's one of the beauties about locums as well, is that you can even use locums as a working interview. So, how many times we had contracts and people tell me like, "Hey, why don't you come here full time?" And from just doing a locums assignment. And no matter how much you are told during an interview, which lasts for a day, they bring you in for a dinner. Then the next day they just show you the OR, and then they keep having you meet a few surgeons. And then they tell you like, okay, well, what do you want? Sign the dotted line. Well, no. Well, you never know a place until you actually work there. And everything seems to be good on paper. A lot of times when we do locums assignments, you can request, and we most of the time we do that as well. We want to talk with the director there and have a phone interview and just kind of like have our questions answered. But sometimes, despite all of that, you find yourself in a place where when you actually go there in the actual work environment, you find things that are not, are not the way they kind of described it to you, or so it's fine at that point. You can always Well, you have to keep your word of honor. You have to continue the assignment that you're in. You have to kind of meet the rules of like, don't cancel within 30 days rule, but then you can use the 30 days rule to your advantage if this is something that cannot be adjusted or fixed. Some assignments, they can adjust the things for you in order for it to work well. I think, but again, and that touches an important subject. Like, so when in Rome, like always, if you find yourself, and something that I was told by one of my chief residents back when I was first or second year resident, and he told me like, if you find yourself arguing with someone, you're going in the wrong way. So, which means if you find yourself in a hospital and you find yourself arguing with the thoracic surgeon, no, this is a case that I do. Where, you don't own the place. And no, if you're going in an argument like this, then you're going the wrong way. If the culture of that place is that is X, Y, and Z, then just follow the culture of that place. Just you're not going to change that culture. You just all you could do is just in your next assignment, you go somewhere else where that culture kind of more fits you, because trying to and that's exactly what happens when you go for a full-time job. Is that I've seen surgeons that they come in and start a full-time job and then they find themselves uh, uh, hopping between places. That doesn't look good in your CV, right? Like, you started a full-time job, you stayed there for 6 months, and then you left, and then you went there for another full-time job, and then you stayed there for like a year, and then you left. And well, why do you do that? Well, because you don't like those places. Well, how about go locum? And I would tell that surgeon who's having that type of issue, go locums. Start in a place. See if you like the culture, and if you do like the culture, and the feeling is mutual between you and the hospital, they will get you. They will buy you out of the locums company, and you will be at least had the advantage of trying the place out through locums and knowing that you're going to actually stay there. So that's if you're a full-time locums, it's fine. You're doing locums, so it doesn't matter if you're hopping between places because that's what you do. But when you're full-time and you go and practice in that hospital as a full-time surgeon, and then you leave in 6 months. I've seen people leave in about 3 months. I've seen a surgeon who started and like 3 months later, like not even 2 months later, gave their notice, like I'm leaving. Well, that doesn't look good. So always, if you feel like you need a working interview, do it through locums. Like, there's no better interview than a working interview where you do an assignment after an assignment after an assignment. Make sure you had your time to review the place, see the culture, work with your colleagues, see the partners that you're going to be working with, see the culture in that place, the OR, how busy, how not busy, and then see the morale of the people around you. And then you can make an easy decision at that point. Hey, yeah, and at that point, you're going to make a more informed decision about, hey, I'm going to stay in that place for a longer period of time. If it doesn't work, nothing taken against you. You just did locums there, you did your assignments, and you just walked out, which is expected. Like, nothing is permanent in locums, so you just did a few assignments, and that's it. They can find someone else, and you're not happy there. So I think that all speaks to, don't stay in a place where you're unhappy. If you're in a full-time position where you feel like, don't just go and interview in another place and then you do an interview and then, oh, it's always the grass. You think the grass is greener on the other side? Well, try it out as locums first. And that's a good way to even do, like, it's almost, think about it like a test drive. And one thing that I always thought about locums is like dating, but full-time is like marriage. It's always easy to date someone and get out of that relationship because it's like dating. You're dating someone. If you like her, you're going to keep dating her. Like, not to mention that, I'm happily married and I know you're happily married too, Simon. So, but, for those people out there, I think it's like more like dating. You see someone, if you like that, you like her, you're going to keep dating her, and and the relationship can go as long as it takes because it's just dating. You need to get out, you can get out. Marriage, on the other hand, no, that's more involved. It's not easy to get into marriage, and it's not easy to get out of it. And I think full-time jobs are like marriage. Like, so you'll find yourself, immersed into something. Trying to get out of there is like a huge notice, and Sometimes you may have to work out your notice period, despite the fact that you don't like the place and you're going to be miserable and everything else. So always make sure before you marry someone is that you date that person really well before you decide to marry. So, and that's what locums does as well. You can do that, or you can just keep dating. You know, some people prefer it that way.
You've added so much value here, Dr. El Sheikh. I really appreciate all the insights that you've given. And I just like reflecting on our conversation today. I'm just so happy to know you, and it's so cool to see you claim your career and your family time through locums. And I appreciate the guidance that you've given to other people who could listen to this episode and implement that. So with that said, I'm going to send you off to go spend some time with your family. To the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure that you share this episode with somebody who could use this message. And I would love it if you enjoyed this interview, if you drop some stars on this episode. It just takes a second on Spotify. Just pull out your phone and give this podcast a rating, because we do want to spread the word, not to pitch locums, but just to help people find what they're looking for, whether that's more income or a better work-life balance. Thank you so much, and I will catch you on the next episode.